Okay, so I guess I will get started. This is Straylight. My real name is Patrick Sheffield. Um, I'm not an artist uh, for profession. I work as an editor in film and commercials and stuff, and I draw for fun, and I also write software. So I'm fairly familiar with blend modes, and so I thought I'd share some of that knowledge today. And to do that, I was going to start out with a really simple explanation just for those who are curious. Yes, yay coders. Uh, about what's going on behind the scenes, and then I thought I'd step through a couple of examples of how you could use it. First off, as most of you know, with the drawings we can have layers, and this is a little example of showing that when we look at it straight on, as we view our image, we see the smiley face, but we can construct that from multiple layers where we have the yellow circle on the background, and then we draw the face on an upper layer. And there would be many reasons for doing that. You might want to change the face, make it smaller, etc., without affecting the yellow circle. So, and ordinarily, you can just think of them as sheets of glass that you can paint on, and then depending on the transparency of your paint, it allows the layers below to show through. So ordinarily the sheets of glass metaphor lets the paint show through from the bottom layers where you haven't painted on the top layers. And each layer is made up of pixels, and the pixel is the smallest dot possible on your screen, and each dot is made up of a color which has a value associated with that color. Um, thanks. Um, so, one pixel in the yellow face, for instance, the yellow face has a set of numbers associated with that pixel color, and the very simple way to look at a blend mode is that instead of the glass just letting the pixels show through from the bottom layers, is it does a mathematical formula on the upper pixel to combine it with the numbers of the lower pixel. And some of those are really simple and straightforward, like multiply, where it just takes the two pixel values and multiplies them by each other. Other ones are more complex. Here's an example of black and white circles and a gradient. So if we use a blend mode of multiply, which just takes the lower pixel and multiplies it by the upper pixel, the white goes away and the white becomes clear. So you can see that the white circle is gone, and the gradient going from white to black becomes increasingly decreasingly transparent as it goes toward the black. Now, the opposite of multiply blend mode is the screen blend mode, and that makes the black transparent and the white is full intensity. And you can see it does the opposite case with the gradient, where we get increasingly thick toward the white. And there are other blend modes available, and I'm not going to explain them all, but some of them are pretty self-explanatory, and other ones you can experiment with. But ones like darken, darken picks the darker color. So in this case, the light blue is not chosen, and the darker blue of the underlying pixels are chosen. But since the dark blue circle is darker than the other ones, that's chosen. And the opposite, of course, is true of lighten. It chooses the lighter color from the choice of the two pixels. And there are a number of very useful blend modes. Burn and dodge, yes, are good. One handy one that I have found is a blend mode of color. And when I drew this, I was more concerned with the likeness and the tones, and I didn't want to have to deal with the color when I first started drawing it. So so I've made my reference image black and white, and then I painted from the reference. And if I take and set the blend mode of this layer to color, then and choose a flesh tone. Now I can paint the color without affecting the tone or the value underneath. And this isn't a very good flesh tone, it's a little bit too yellow, but so with very broad strokes I can paint in the flesh tones and color her eyes. Obviously I'm doing this very quickly to demonstrate the effect. When I colored it for real, I took some time and chose good colors, but that's what my color layer looked like. It's, again, just painted in very, very broad strokes, so to speak, but when you're combined with the accuracy of the black and white drawing, you get that kind of effect. Does that make sense? And, there are a number of reasons why you might initially draw in black and white. Maybe your reference is in black and white, or maybe you just want to change some color, so you could use the color layer to change the color of her eyes, let's say from blue now. When I do this, I don't have to redraw the entire eye. I simply go in and change the color layer. Or I could have added this as a color layer over the top. Right now I'm just getting rid of some of the tint on the highlight, so the highlight shows through. So as you can see from the layers, I'm just clicking through them so you can see. See, Burn's a nice one. And there we go. Anyway, that's one way you can use yes, layers are our friends. The next thing I wanted to show you is a fancier blend, and it's called the overlay blend mode. And the overlay blend mode works like this. Anything above or brighter than middle gray lightens your image, and anything darker than middle gray darkens your image without regard to the color, without changing the color really underneath it. So let me get rid of this. So this was my drawing for the bristle brush competition, and once I'd finished the basic drawing, it felt a little flat. It needed some shading. So what I did was add a layer above it, and if I color fill that to middle gray, and that's by clicking the layer, color fill, middle gray. Now, obviously that's covered over my image, but if I set my blend mode to overlay, middle gray becomes transparent. So now, if I go in, and let me change my tool to bristle brush, just because that's what I used initially on this. And I set my color to lighter than middle gray, so anything above middle gray, and I just paint into my currently gray layer. Everywhere I paint, it makes it brighter. And if I make it darker than middle gray, it darkens the area underneath it. It's a little too dark. And I can just work it up a little bit brighter by mixing in some of the lighter grays. But in this way I can add shading without worrying about the colors or changing the underlying colors, or even paying attention to the color underneath, because all it does is affect the brightness of the color. Maybe I want to highlight on, too bright. I'll turn this down. So what I'll often do is I will just draw in broad tones, and then it's actually taken from something that photographers do to images afterwards. They call it sculpting, but it lets them highlight certain areas of the image and darken other areas selectively. And I'm just doing the same thing to my painting without affecting the colors. And rather than spend too much time on this, I will show you. So first of all, here's what it looks like in normal. I've just been sort of painting in broad strokes the shades that I want there, and when I finished it, let me turn that to normal. So that's what my shading layer looked like. And when I set that to overlay, you can see what the difference is and how I'm not affecting the underlying colors, I'm just brightening them or darkening them. And sometime when I was playing with this afterwards, I thought, I'd really like that effect to be a bit stronger. So I went down to and set my blend mode to burn. And after I did this, I thought it was looking pretty good. But the background felt a little flat. It's a stylized cityscape behind her, but it was intended not to draw attention to itself, but it feels very flat. So I thought what would be good is to add a gradient to that so that it starts lighter at the top and gets darker as it goes down near the bottom. And since this was the bristle brush competition, I didn't want to use the regular gradient that's in the that's in the vector fill. So I thought I could just draw a gradient using the bristle brush. So just starting from lighter near the top, I just started. Okay. Lighter near the top, I just started painting and then a bit darker. Yes, the clicky click is my stylus. Anyway, you get the idea, and I'll show you what I ended up with. So I created this gradient with just using bristle brush strokes, and now if I put that over the background and I set the blend mode to overlay, why is that? Oh, there we go. So you can see that that was my background before. Now I have a textural gradient that goes lighter near the top and darker near the bottom. And when I put her up against that, I liked it, but I wanted it to be just a little stronger. And so what I did was clear that. And, this is something that you could do as well. If you find the overlay isn't working strong enough for you, you can copy your layer by putting a blank layer underneath it and then copying your layer, and now you will get double the effect. And I also wanted to vary it a little bit, so what I did then was I took my layer and went into transform, and I flipped it left to right, which is hard to see. Let me put that in normal for now. Turn these off. Set this to normal just so you can see. So that sorry, it's acting funny. Sorry. Normal. I flipped it the wrong way. No. There we go. Sorry. So that's my gradient, same as the gradient above it. Go into transform, flip it X to Y. Now I still have the gradient going from top to bottom, but the strokes are switched left to right. So when I lay them over the top of each other, it won't be repeating the same strokes. So it'll add an additional amount of texture to the whole thing. So now if I set that to overlay and I set the other one to overlay, now I get this nice texture over the background that has a feel of painting, but it makes the background get darker as it gets near the bottom. And then one more thing I wanted to do with this is I wanted to grab some of that texture that I just created by creating that gradient, and I wanted to put it on her as well. So I copied the gradient one more time, brought it up above her, and set my blend to overlay. But I didn't want it to be so strong on her, so I just reduced the opacity. So now I still get some of the gradient and some of the feel of brush strokes. You can see when I turn it on, you can feel that it gets lighter near the top and darker near the bottom, and it has a feeling of brush strokes. It adds a kind of nice organic texture to the overall painting, and it's not too overwhelming. Yeah, there we go, ombre. And I guess this is going quicker than I thought, but I do have one other little exercise that I wanted to show with using let me add one more layer. Using filters and blend modes to combine them. Let's say that I wanted to do a sort of graphic accent to this, maybe for a title, or maybe just because that would add to my what I'm doing right now is I'm just going to create a black rectangle on its own layer. Let me clear that. So I'm just going to put a black didn't mean to have gradient on. Sorry. No gradient. So I'm just creating a black rectangle. And now I'm going to turn my gradient on and set the color to white. And I'm going to fill it. That's a little. I don't know why. I'm not getting this just right. Let's see. Oh, sorry, I forgot to undo. Forgot to set my blend mode to on. Yes, thank you. And I am going to do this freehand. The thing about gradients is that they go in the direction that you first drag to create them. So if I drag up, it goes to the top. If I drag sideways, it goes sideways. So when I did this one, I dragged from the middle outward, and then I missed a corner. So, there we go. So, yeah, I want a little more. Yeah, this will be all right. Actually, I want it to be a little darker on the other side, so I'm going to change my fill to black, and I'm going to do it a little bit this way. There we go. All right, so now I have this rectangle with a gradient on it. I'm going to go into layers, choose a filter, choose my filter to be dot screen, and bring the width up and the sharpness up. And now I've created this sort of graphic element here. But it's going right over her face. So what I really want to do here is I'd like to color all of the black area one color and have all of the white just stay white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this layer down, and now I'm going to turn off my gradient. Let's say I wanted to fill this with a red. Let's just say red. Now I've got a red rectangle the exact same size as my screened rectangle. Now if you remember, when you set the blend mode to multiply, then white becomes transparent and black stays. When you set it to screen, now the black is transparent and the white stays on. So I can now take and combine these layers, and now I have a nice graphic gradiated series of white dots against a red background. And now if I change this blend mode to multiply, I have this cool sort of graphic element that I can use. And, it doesn't really go with this image, but it's something that you might use for a different kind of painting, maybe a cyberpunk kind of painting. I could duplicate it. Let's copy that. And I could change the color of it. I could add another layer. Running out of layers here. Let's make a blue one. So we'll copy that down, and let's fill it with yellow. I'm going to select that layer. All right. So now I have a yellow layer. I can use the color blend mode again. And now I have a yellow version of my same element. I can merge that down. Let's undo that. That didn't work right. Oh. There we go. Now I have two of them. Set my blend mode to screen. Blend mode to screen. All right. Now I can transform and move this elsewhere. Sorry, I meant to set the blend mode to multiply. What happened? I lost my dots when I was doing that merge. Let me do that one more time. Sorry. Sorry, I'm undoing because I... Now, when I merge this down... There we go. All right. Now, anyway, you get the idea. I made them in different colors and I'm using them as graphic elements in my painting. And they were fairly straightforward to create, and they look cool. That is pretty much all that I had prepared for today. Does anybody have questions? You're welcome. Oh, I did have one more thing. Um, because all of this concept of layers and blend modes pretty much originated in Photoshop, um, many Photoshop tutorials for retouching pictures or how you can, if you just do a Google of uh, Photoshop blend mode tutorials, you will find techniques that you can use from Photoshop and just translate them into Sketch Club. Thank you, everyone. You're all welcome. Thanks for coming.